Saturday night's main event. This was actually a massive deal for WWE. In the 80s, Rhea Ripley is in the house, very over with the Texas crowd, for a showdown with Nia Jax, who's not even on the same show as Rhea Ripley and has an angle going with the other women's champ, but whatever. Clearly I'm just a stickler for the rules these bookers set and then break willy-nilly at the dime of a hat. Yeah, it's fine, whatever. Yeah, it's no big deal. Anyways, they kept this match quick. You see, it's very dangerous for people of Nia Jax's aesthetic to be involved in prolonged physical activity of any sort. You see, the hurt can only take so much. Ripley's the powerhouse here, doing her best to ground the immovable object. A bit of back and forth, some standard moves. Jax flattens Ripley with the big Samoan drop more than once. Credit to them here. The moment with Ripley powering up and powerbombing Jax looked pretty impressive. Ultimately, Ripley avoided a big splash to hit Jax with a riptide, ending a sensibly worked champ versus monster kind of match. The crowd was pretty into it. Fine way to open a show like this one. When Sheamus finally wins the Intercontinental title at some point, it's actually going to feel like a huge deal. And it's quite fascinating how a guy whose big pushes were very poorly received, and who's hung around the mid-card for aeons, winning a secondary title, is going to get a huge pop when it finally happens. Not tonight, though. Brunbreaker got a big star entrance, and this was a match about making him look good. And Brunbreaker rules. Great athlete, full of explosive intensity. He's got physical presence, and he plays to the camera pretty well. Sheamus did the veteran's good deed here, putting the young champ over. This match was pretty stiff, as is to be expected with Sheamus, and they worked in a good bit of psychology with his busted ribs, costing him the match after punishment throughout. Breakker gorilla pressed Sheamus at one point. Some really good displays of athletic strength on this show so far. Breakker referenced his forefathers with a neat Frankensteiner. Sheamus, meanwhile, played a solid, tough old babyface in peril here, frequently fighting hard against a faster, stronger foe. Ultimately, Sheamus's bad ribs ruin his crack at a brogue kick, and Breakker flattens him with a spear for the win. Really good match here, and exactly how Breakker should be presented in general. Awesome spot on the outside too, I forgot to mention just now, where Breakker speared a jumping Sheamus. Just a solid match in general, really good stuff. Next up, one of the absolute best to ever do it, Shawn Michaels himself, the king of both big match, main event epics, and zesty entrances, came out looking like a corpse of a shell of the once unstoppable Heartbreak Kid. I tell you, don't do drugs, kids. Kevin Owens wore a Cody Sucks Eggs shirt, which is just pathetically childish. Is he meant to be a dangerous rogue who shatters people's necks with pile drivers, or a goofball weasel we're meant to laugh at? He can't be both. He can be one or the other. I think he suits the latter more, to be honest. Cody Rhodes came out and he cut the kind of promo he cuts every week everywhere he turns up for years on end. The Groundhog Day of WWE champions. The lisp. Something about respect. My father is Dusty Rhodes. The title, respect, Dusty Rhodes. He's like a ChatGPT wrestler. It's unbearable. I don't get how people love this guy so much. I know I'm sounding like a worked mark here, but it's just... it beggars belief. I remember in AEW everyone turned on him and I thought that was fair enough. When's that going to happen in WWE? When do you think that happens? Or are the crowds just too different? Anyway, Shawn Michaels, he carried this. He came out looking like the Count Orlok version of himself. But credit to the guy, he held this bland segment together and kept his hometown crowd engaged. He hits the sweet chin music on Owens. Decent pup. And that is nice for HBK. Amazing wrestler. Doing a great job on NXT. I'm all for giving the guy a nice moment with his home city peeps. But Kevin Owens looked like a comedy heel here, rather than a serious threat to anyone. And the ladder match has already been announced. In reality, this is a terrible business practice, to announce a fight before both competitors have signed on. What is this? WWE booked by Dana White? The Rhodes-Owens feud, frankly, it just needs to end now. Owens is not main event credible. Cody Rhodes, he has Randy Orton, he has Roman Reigns, and even Damian Priest to potentially light things up with in the coming months. Let Cody Rhodes win again, and then move on after the Royal Rumble to an actual threat to this title run of his that apparently just refuses to end. Now, I was fully expecting a clean win for Jacob Fatu over Braun Strowman here. Instead, we got an angle more than anything else to help solidify Fatu as a bloodthirsty maniac. Pretty old-fashioned big man matchup. Not a criticism that it makes sense to book it old school when you've got two monster men in the house. Fatu bodied Strowman with a big dive at one point. Samoan drop on the announcer's table. Big bump for Strowman to take at this point in his career. Fatu's hips, let's be real, they don't lie. He's got that Tony Storm lower body going on, and he kept slamming into Strowman with them. The hip and rear end beating to the jobster among men got so bad the referee called the match booze, because no one likes a DQ finish. Funny that. The post-match stuff made up for it a bit though, as Strowman got reduced to a bloody mess as the Samoan werewolf squished him with springboard moonsaults. Fans loved it too. This was probably meant to get heel heat. Damn you, Jacob Fatu, you're squashing Strowman. But they were chanting, one more time. Fans love a wild man character, and Fatu's really capturing it at the moment. The main event. Look, wrestling can be a bit homoerotic. It's okay. This isn't hate. It's not trolling. Wrestling is a fun entertainment medium, but let's be real, sometimes it can just look a little gay. Not the end of the world. Put the pitchforks down, guys. It's not a problem. The reason I bring this up is because this main event had a surprisingly intimate finish. Jey Uso runs head first between Gunther's legs. Was that meant to be a spear? I remember Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns did a great spot once, many years ago, where Reigns went for a spear and a jumping Rollins caught him in a pedigree. Very clever. More importantly, it was very well executed. Perfectly timed, very slick. Seth Rollins, though, you see, he is incredibly agile and smooth in the ring in general, especially back then. Gunther is not. This looked comically awkward. Gunther hits Jey Uso with some very sloppy powerbombs before getting on top of a prone Jey Uso in a very compromising position. I don't even know how else to describe it in a way that YouTube would allow, but it was for the pinfall win. Quite simply, pure and utter homosexuality. I felt like I was watching an episode of Oz, or the first 40 minutes of Shawshank. And you know, that's okay. This isn't meant as hate, guys. It's a valid criticism. It's how it looked. If this is a new gimmick for Gunther, then fine, but otherwise I don't know what else to say. Then the thing with Gunther, beyond his violation of poor Jey Uso near the end there, is that he likes to make all of his moves look like a struggle. For realism, normally, so nothing looks too choreographed or telegraphed and looks like a fight. It's a fair enough mentality, because you want it to be convincing. The whole point of wrestling is to suspend the disbelief. But it also means almost nothing he does looks smooth or crisp at all. And in fact, sometimes, like here, it doesn't even look high impact. And against a frankly very mid in-ring talent like Jey Uso, what it leads to is, rather than an intense struggle of strength and conviction, what we get is an awkward, cumbersome bout that looks a bit cack-handed. One spear from Jey Uso saw him not even leave his feet. It's a bad look, especially considering we got explosive, super spears from Brunbreaker earlier on in the show. The closing stretch of this had some good crowd heat. Jey Uso, he has that fan support despite his flaws. But overall, it was just quite a bland, mediocre match, with some really awkward, badly done moments. On top of that, and this was a problem throughout the show, ad breaks cutting matches down the middle, hampering the flow of the bout and general audience investment for those watching from home. The commercial placements were frequently an insult and disservice to the talent involved throughout the entire broadcast. The main event was really a weaker moment on this show. Jey Uso was not a complete enough worker to function as a main eventer, even with his popularity right now. The Gunther experiment, meanwhile, that seems to have run its course. And as champ, there's been a lot of exposed flaws in his game over the past few months. He's a decent wrestler, but he lacks the charisma and presence to work as a long-term heel champ leading man. On a show where Drew McIntyre, Seth Rollins, and CM Punk are all quite over, it seems weird to think Gunther might carry the big gold all the way to WrestleMania. Overall, Jacob Fatu and Brunbreaker both got some time to shine. Good wrestlers. They ought to both get main event pushes this year, really. Otherwise, it was a predictable but okay show. Much better than Raw or SmackDown this week, if nothing else.